in Rio. 3 days and nights of wild, raucous revelry.
The evolution of Samba, from the favelas to Carnival. The history of Samba. Brazil is a nation of mixing, with its entire national identity being an unmistakable yet blurred mix of European, indigenous, and African cultures. One of Brazil's most well-known international cultural exports is samba, a genre of music with Afro-Brazilian roots going back to the 16th century. Initially developing primarily in the northeast of the country, samba originated in the dances and religious practices of the West African slaves brought to colonial Brazil by the Portuguese. This early form of samba took the forms of circles or lines, composed by individuals dancing to percussion and clapping rhythms. In the 19th century, samba began spreading farther south and to the cities. In Rio de Janeiro, the urban samba emerged, with its first compositions coming from the Afro-Brazilian community. Following the end to Brazilian slavery in 1888, Rio's population was largely black, with many of the older men having become leaders of religious organizations in the city. Black religious ceremonies would begin to feature music with a softened drum beat, along with lyrical improvisation. As samba became more important in the entertainment of the black population in Rio, people would begin throwing parties late at night, leading to increased racial tensions as many white residents would attempt to use the police to have these parties shut down. The phenomenon then spread to the Rio Carnival, the world's largest Catholic carnival festival, which the people of Rio have held yearly before the observance of Lent. Afro-Brazilians of the time attempted to covertly introduce elements of African religions into the festival so that they would be able to practice their own religions without being in open defiance of the culture of the colonizers. Due to the ties to Brazil's black population, white Brazilians largely ignored the phenomenon until the first attempts to nationalize the genre. Part 2. Creation of Samba Schools. After the inventions of the record player and the radio, composers and performers from the slums of Rio would have their music heard by many. With increased cultural relevance, the first samba schools were established around the late 1920s in Rio de Janeiro. The first school was established in 1926, titled Deixa Falar, and primarily concerned itself with organizing parades on the streets filled with samba music and dancing. The spirit of the early schools was one of friendship and mutual assistance, seeking mutual growth over competition. In 1934, the Samba School Union was formed in response to the fear of government suppression. Part 3. Nationalizing Samba. During the 1930s and 1940s, Getúlio Vargas ruled Brazil as a populist dictator who sought to increase nationalistic sentiments in the populace. His regime saw samba schools as a potential mechanism for social control to preempt black social movements for equality, being the possible channels for the implementation of the ideology of racial democracy with Rio. The mayor of Rio, a populist politician by the name of Pedro Ernesto, began giving explicit authorization to various samba schools to participate in the Rio Carnival. This approval came with the condition that each authorized school must focus its performance on a major Brazilian historical figure or event. The Carnival celebrations began shifting from local neighborhoods into the designated area downtown. This legitimization by the government proved popular amongst those involved with the samba schools. Part 4. Evolving Brazil, Evolving Samba. In 1960, during a period of relative stability and growth, President Juscelino Kubitschek decided to move the country's capital from Rio to a newly constructed city, Brasilia, which was to represent the ideals of the nation. Rio's economy took a hit, and the city grew more desperate for tourism money. Initially, The Samba schools were something spontaneous and indigenous. But this did not remain true as the schools changed to pander to the carnival judges. The parade judges sought to make samba more nationalistic and commercially exploitable. In Alison Raphael's book, From Popular Culture to Microenterprise, she quotes a 1954 Carnival columnist stating, "Either the samba schools do not have artists capable of executing these works with finesse, or they don't have the funds to undertake artwork compatible with the grandeur of the spectacle as a whole." With the potential prize money, the government, through the judges, was able to influence the size of the parades, the costumes, and the floats used by the schools in their performances. Portela, the most successful samba school to date, had a 15-man band in 1930. By 1960, the band had grown to have almost 200 members. The schools became enterprises. They owned businesses which did their best to catch the attention of tourists. The schools were charging admission for rehearsals and borrowing more money to fund the increasing levels of spectacle demanded of their performances. Samba schools were no longer owned by the workers and made for the people, but instead owned by the owner class and existed to appeal to outsiders. Part 5. Call to Action. Samba became a mechanism for social control under a dictatorial regime that utilized nationalistic rhetoric to continue the economic exploitation of its people and to achieve a closer financial relationship with the United States. The music and dance, which started as something spontaneous and indigenous, became nationalized, and the samba schools which performed it went from being communal organizations of labor to being businesses that were exploited. If one genuinely cares about Brazil and samba, then the modern state of Brazil should make one worry. It is a country marked by a rise in far-right nationalism and populism, and growing wealth inequality under a brutal form of capitalism, controlled by politicians and financial interests who wish to position the country as a puppet state of the U.S. We cannot allow current trends to continue. To aid the Brazilians struggling under poverty, one can make a donation to the Central Única das Favelas, CUFA, a Brazilian NGO which creates community centers and educational programs for Brazilian teenagers, helping them lead lives in which they can avoid turning to crime. A financial contribution to CUFA would be invaluable to the youth of Brazil. Another impactful way to improve the lives of Brazilians would be to support the 2022 presidential campaign of Lula, the 35th president of Brazil, who served as the first leftist president since President João Goulart was overthrown by a U.S. backed military dictatorship in 1964. This coup led to several decades of tyranny and human rights violations. Having served from 2003 to 2010, Lula created several new social programs, including Bolsa Familia and Fome Zero, which dramatically cut down poverty and created economic growth, bringing Brazil into a new period of increasing development and renewed hope. On the 2nd of October 2022, Brazilians will be voting between Lula, a democratic socialist, and Bolsonaro, the incumbent far right fascist accused of crimes against humanity for his intentional mishandling of the country's COVID-19 pandemic. If you're Brazilian, please vote for Lula and the candidates of the Workers' Party. And if you're not, please donate to the Workers' Party to support democracy, equality, and rational governance for all Brazilians.